Thank you all so much for clicking on today's Seattle Seahawks video. Before we dive into the rumors and news, if you haven't already, hit that big red button and subscribe. As free agency approaches, as the draft approaches, we're going to keep you guys covered on everything going on around the Seahawks. So if you don't want to miss anything, hit that big red button and subscribe today. Rumors and news coming at you guys. I am Tom Downey. Let's begin with a free agency one. How about going after current and soon to be potentially former Packers center Corey Linsley? This was suggested by Sports Illustrated, saying that the Seahawks couldn't afford to miss out on him. Now, purely from a player and filling a need perspective, yeah, I agree. Corey Linsley's the best free agent center by, I would argue, a pretty significant margin this offseason. It would fill a major need, replacing Ethan Posick, and it would likely, and this is very important too, help keep Russell Wilson happy because he appears to have some issues with the organization right now. One big potential red flag is the cost to afford to resign or to sign Corey Linsley, which we'll get to here in a little bit. But purely from a player perspective, Lindsey is way better than Ethan Posick, who finally got a chance to start this year after being a second-round pick at LSU several years ago. He was serviceable, I guess, but I think you're looking for an upgrade, and the last couple of games, I think that really showed he's not doing quite as well as we need him to. Now, the cost perspective. You want Corey Linsley? You're probably going to have to win a bidding war, because this is going to be his last big contract probably, and that legitimately probably will approach, if not exceed, $12.5 million per year. I would not be surprised if once free agency comes and goes, if Corey Linsley is the new highest paid center in the NFL, because guess what? That's how contracts worked. The new really good guy always gets paid the most, especially if he actually hits the open market. So I'm down to bring him in. It's going to be expensive, and you'll probably have to work some other contracts out, which we'll get to here in a little bit. But do you guys want to sign Corey Linsley? This will actually be the pinned comment on today's video. So get that ad break here on YouTube, scroll on down, get your votes in. It's Y for yes or N for no. Let's talk Carlos Dunlap now here for the Seahawks. ESPN and Brady Henderson reporting that it is quote-unquote likely that Dunbar ends up being released and ends up testing the open market. Now, I will make note, as we've said before, the Seahawks want to bring back Dunlap, although it's at a lower cost. That second note you see up on screen, $14.1 million, that is the base salary that Dunlap is due this season. The Seahawks could save all of that by cutting him, and there is no guaranteed money, although there is a partial guarantee coming up in the very near future. Dunlap was a massive reason why the Seahawks defense was so much better in the back half of the season. Significantly better. 14 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, and a stupid high 14 quarterback hits. When Dunlap came over for a 7th-round pick in B.J. Finney, well, he was the pass rusher the organization desperately needed. And you look at where Seattle sits right now on this defensive line, and especially at this edge rusher spot. You have Carlos Dunlap. L.J. Collier, Rasheem Green can play some defense down, can play some defensive end. They're kind of rotation pieces at best. Alton Robinson showed a couple flashes, but never really emerged. Benson Mayowa is also a free agent. Okay, he's not a number one anyway. You took Darrell Taylor out of round 2 in Tennessee, and he never played this year. So in an ideal world, you bring back Carlos Dunlap because he's a really good football player, and you need pass rush help, frankly, even probably with him on the roster. Now, the problem is he's owed a $3 million roster bonus on March 21st. That's kind of your decision deadline. My expectation, I don't think Dunlap's back on just his 1 year, $14.1 million that he has left on his contract. I don't think Seattle would want to do that. Now, I am very curious to see what Dunlap ends up getting in the open market. Is he going to be able to command anything approaching $14 million? At his age, probably not, especially with a upcoming down salary cap season. So, I think what ends up happening, I agree with ESPN's prediction here. The Seahawks, in the end, choose/are forced to cut Carlos Dunlap. They save $14 million, and they remain heavily interested in bringing him back for 2021, but on a different/cheaper deal. What Seattle could do, for example, is let's say he commands a $10 million a year deal. You could bring him back on a $220 or a $330, but backload that contract and structure that deal in such a way in which, frankly, it might even be half of that $14.1 million cap hit. Then you can use that money to add some more offensive line help. So I fully believe the Seahawks want to bring back Dunlap, but I think it's going to depend on what the market actually ends up looking like and just how much he can get and what's going to be, I think, an unusual and probably slow-starting NFL free agency. So what would you guys do with Carlos Dunlap? I'll give you 3 options here. You can type in C if you want to cut him. You can type in K if you want to keep him. Or you can type in R if you want to redo that deal somehow. I'm going to vote R myself. Now, I might have to go C and then R to get a K, as unusual as that sounds. I want Dunlap on the Seahawks. It's not going to be as easy as you would hope, though, to make it happen with that pretty significant base salary coming up. So get your votes in. C for cut, K for keep, R for redo that deal. To another Seahawks defensive lineman now, LJ Collier, who, well, he revealed a couple days ago, A, he had surgery to clean up his ankle. Nothing to panic about there. That stuff is fairly routine. You're a football player. Guess what happens? You sprain it, you roll it, you get it beat up, you go in and you fix it to avoid a future long-term issue. Now, Collier in 2020, much better football player. Relative to his 2019 season, no duh, because he was bad, and there's nowhere. He said he wants to be a Pro Bowler in 2021, and I applaud the lofty goal. I think it's possible if you have another similar type of jump. His first year, yikes. 3 tackles, his pressure rate, less than 1.2%. Oh dear. 2020, meanwhile, 3 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, a couple rather clutch plays mixed in there. His pressure rate was almost 7%. If you can double those sacks and tackle for loss numbers, which is asking a lot, that's a really good sign for the Seahawks defense. Now, we just mentioned Dunlap. We mentioned Mayowa. LJ Collier can play some base defensive end. I still want to see him get some work as a interior pass rusher, lined up at defensive tackle, probably opposite Jaron Reed. So there is upside with the team's former first-round pick out of TCU, a move that, frankly, I did not like. And if you can show growth again in 2020, I think we'll all feel a lot better about the team's former first-round pick. Today's show is made possible by our sportsbook partner, BetUS. Head over to chatsports.com/bet and use the promo code you see right here. That is Seahawks125. When you use that URL and that promo code, you'll get the deposit bonus, right? Otherwise, you might not get it. So, if you want to bet on sports, be it March Madness coming up, the NBA, hockey even, chatsports.com/bet, and don't forget that promo code Seahawks125. Back to the offensive line, this time via the draft. How about Deonte Brown, the Bama offensive guard, called the ideal draft target by Bleacher Report? I don't know about that, actually. Brown, who did play left guard for Alabama, so from a need perspective, certainly checks out. I think in the NFL is going to be at his best in the running game, probably of like power scheme and less of an outside zone scheme, if you will. The Seahawks' goal with addressing the offensive line is to protect Russell Wilson better. And although Deonte Brown could slot in right now at left guard and be probably better than Jordan Simmons, not saying all that much, I don't know if he is the best fit for what this team is supposed to be with Russell Wilson. If you're looking for another mauler in the run game, you want to pair Deonte Brown and Damian Lewis and just run over people, that's intriguing. If you want to protect Russell Wilson as best as possible, I don't know about that one. So some other names I want to mention as top interior offensive line prospects, guys who are going to be a center or a guard for you. Landon Dickerson, Creed Humphrey, Josh Myers. If you don't get a Corey Linsley, or if you sound like an Alex Mack and want to draft someone to develop behind them, I would recommend one of those guys. Wyatt Davis and Trey Smith, really good potential at offensive guard, and I wondered if Trey Smith actually might end up making the most sense in the end for the Seahawks relative to who's going to be on the board and if they can actually get him and have him be a good fit. I don't want to necessarily take Brown in round 2. I don't think he'd be the worst pick ever, but I doubt he falls to round 4. I'd feel better about him in round 3. It's the awkward spot of the Seahawks with where they're drafting, having so few draft picks. Maybe they could trade down in the end. So who do you guys want the Seahawks to draft? Let me know in the comments section. Any player, any position. Remember, you don't pick till late round 2, so don't throw in any obvious top 10, top 15 guys, please. Wrapping up today's show with a couple notes on the coaching hires that just went down per The Athletic. First up is Carl Tater Smith. Yeah, they call him Tater, as I'm sure you guys know. He spent a lot of time with Seattle. 2011, 2017 was the team's quarterback's coach. Was with Houston, and now he's back. He's going to handle some type of clock and game management role, eye in the sky type of guy. He'll also apparently get the assistant head coach title. Meanwhile, his son, Tracy Smith, because nepotism is alive and well in the NFL, he's going to have an undefined role, at least for now, with special teams. And then a name I think you guys will certainly remember, DeShawn Shead. Yes, the former Seahawks cornerback is taking on a defensive quality control coach role, replacing Tom Donatel, who took a job with the Chargers. So 3 minor changes, all, by the way, I will make note, they were done before the Super Bowl. So if you guys wondering about the Carl Smith one, no, it has nothing to do with Russell Wilson and his issues with the organization. At least that's what the reports say from the Seattle Times and from The Athletic.